Really with Spirit of Matter. And we are today on a Saturn day and a Mars hour, with Mars ruling the midheaven on 23 degrees Scorpio and Saturn ruling the ascendant. In the second house, Saturn in the second house, retrograde in Pisces. Mars on the 22nd degree of Libra, here in the ninth whole sign house, applying to Ketu and opposing the moon on the 22nd degree of Aries. And I could feel this moon going to the 22nd degree. I kind of had to protect my energy boundaries, put on my, protective shield. And this episode is actually dedicated to Saturn. But this is Saturn across the generations, or Saturn in synastries. And what prompted this episode, I basically began doing that with Mars. And since we are in Saturn day and Venus is applying to oppose Saturn, I wanted to give you a kind of Saturn behavior in synastries to other Saturn. And this is also intergenerational wisdom. Now let's take this chart. And in this chart, we have Saturn in Pisces. Okay? Let's say this chart was a person. First degree of Pisces. What does it do? It sextiles the first degree of Capricorn and the first degree of Taurus in terms of the generations. So people born with Saturn on the first degree of Capricorn are having their Saturn sextile in people born with Saturn on the first degree of Pisces, which is now. It trines the first degree of Scorpio, which is Mars ruled, and the first degree of Cancer. And so the generations born with Saturn on the first degree of Scorpio are having their Saturn trine right now. And the people that were or will be born with Saturn on the first degree of Cancer are having the trine to today's chart. That basically means that in terms of the generations, okay, we have the generation coming after us. That's, let's say, Saturn first degree of Pisces and then Saturn first degree of Aries will have a 30-degree angle, which is a minor aspect. And that just means that the Saturn follows, okay? There is building up on the other sign. And then we have the skip. And Saturn is about 2 to 3 years in a sign. So skip 2 or 3 years, you get the Saturn to try to have a 30-degree. And then skip another, so you have skip 6 years or 7 years, you get the Saturn to sextile your Saturn. Then you have to skip, a couple of above a decade to have the Saturn trining your Saturn. Well, and what happens when we have these Saturns, let's say, opposing each other? What that means is my structure and your structure, the way I do discipline and dedication and the way you do discipline and dedication, don't compile, or conflict. When it's square, then my structure is squaring your structure. My structure is at odds, is bickering at your structure. If from Capricorn to Aquarius, okay, the structure of Aquarius is antithetical, it's still building up on Capricorn. A one world government is building up on the Capricorn era, okay, of hierarchical structures. So we're building up the hierarchy, until we have a one world, all-encompassing government. With the antithetical forces and the chaotic forces, that is we, the people, desiring for unity. Okay, we, the people in Japan, we, the people in China, we, the people in Iraq, and we, the people in Monaco, and we, the people in Siberia, and we, the people in Alaska. We want freedom of movement, we want this, we want that, and then we have this, union, which is also antithetical, but also continuing and building up on the Capricorn structure of the nation state. So when we have a synastry with a person who is not in our, not in the 2-3 years in which we were born, we're going to have these Saturns already beginning to form angles with each other. Because Saturn rules karma. And Saturn also rules agriculture when we talk about biodiversity. Okay? Because Saturn rules karma, having the karmic passages of one another complementary is vital to a connection. Okay? If the accumulation of karma for me is in alignment with the accumulation of karma for you, in the sense that, let's say I plant a forest, okay, which is a very, by the way, if you talk about Jupiter, it rules trees, Saturn agriculture, so planting a forest can be very Jupiter and Saturn remediation. Can be, you can try it. So let's say I plant a forest. And this is my karma is to plant a forest, okay? And let's say your karma is actually to work in the government, okay? If for me to plant a forest, let's say I have this, Jupiter ruled Saturn, so it's another Saturn Jupiter, with Pisces, I want to plant a forest. And your role is to work in the government, and our Saturn sextile or trine, then you could be facilitating in legislation and enforcement that allow it for me to be bureaucratically easier to start receiving grants or start constructing the forest and have rights on the land and have my project growing and have these trees sustaining. So I need you on my team because you're complementary to what I do. Your karma. But what if your karma is not to plant trees and grow trees, but actually to cut trees? And you're having this agenda that people won't be able to grow crops, and you're working at the government, and your job is basically to plant cameras instead of where tree was. And maybe my karma is to plant trees in the city, but your karma is to cut these trees and replace them with cameras. Okay, now we have karmas that are contradicting each other. They could be at square, they could be at opposition. And so my path of accumulation is at odds with your path of accumulation. You came to this world to plant these cameras on the place of trees, or to cut these trees so that somebody else will plant cameras on them. Okay, I came to the world to plant more trees in cities. Oh, now we're in a big mess, because when you fulfill your karma, I actually have deprivation for my karma, and when I fulfill my karma, I give you troubles. I plant more trees. You plant one camera, I plant 7 trees over every tree you planted. Okay, and this is how Saturn transits are important. So let's say I have my Saturn in 12 degrees Scorpio. Let's say you're going to have your Saturn In 12 degrees Pisces, I can give you a Saturn return reading. I'm probably good for you. But let's say you try to get this reading from even a Saturn in Sagittarius. Now they're karma in energy. They don't even know this. In energy is not accumulating with your karma. And you go to them and say, I want a Saturn return reading. They could be very good. Okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to harm you. But it just means that their accumulation of karma is just not in alignment with what you're doing. So when you get in a Saturn return reading, you might be wanting to do that with a person whose karma is facilitating, your karma. What happens when you have the square? Let's say you have Saturn in Aquarius. Okay. When I was going through my Saturn maturation, well, I have actually two people with Saturn in Aquarius that are actually squaring my Saturn. And so as I was maturing, I had to leave them. Because their accumulation of karma was contradicting my accumulation of karma. Because it's square. It's energies. And on the Saturn return, they were doing things that from my vantage point, like that's in detriment, but I was not the right person to help them on their Saturn return. Actually, it was a Saturn time. During this Saturn time, we had to leave. Because it's a square relation. Okay? What they came to do in this world and what I came to do in this world is not the same. And so when it comes to synastry, you see how I look at it. Okay? Do you see how I look at it? Do you see how this is not your usual synastry cookbook? Okay, because I don't just look at it from the relationship to the parent, the relation to the father, the relation to this, the relation to that. I look at it from when I do my Saturn right, when I put the dedication as well as the resting time, promote agriculture or whatnot. When I do my Saturn, whether it's appease my Saturn or fulfill my Saturn, whether it's in or out of sect, okay, when I tend to my Saturn, then it does matter if when you tend to your Saturn, are we going to contribute to each other's path or are we going to not do it? And when our Saturns are not in alignment, when our Saturns are not harmonious in a synastry, and if you don't have anything, if this Saturn is, for example, in a composite, trining something like an outer planet or trining a personal planet, then we go to that personal planet and that can be a point of remediation. If it can, maybe it wouldn't work. But it simply means that when I do Saturn correctly, I must separate from you. When you do Saturn correctly, you must take me out of your life. You must get me out of your life. Because I interrupt with your fulfillment of karma. I bicker at the energy of your dedication. You're dedicating yourself to something, and then comes my energy with my Saturn, and the more that I'm taking responsibility, the more difficult it is for you to take responsibility. I had this also with the person who was on the other side of the Me Too in the academia. And so the more I was taking responsibility and growing up and maturing up, I had to speak up. I have Saturn opposing Venus, okay? So I had to speak up. And that was bickering at their own trajectory. Okay, but that was like an extreme case. And we indeed had a composite of Saturn Ketu. Okay, so that means, some people call it karmic debt or karmic this or karmic that. It just played out. And then I had with a younger person that also had a Saturn conjunct Sun in Aquarius. And as he was going through his Saturn return, I was actually trying to assist. I was studying aromatherapy, and I was doing my apprenticeship, and he was one of the cases, and I tried to do like my best, but it was getting at him. I was touching the core issue, but it was actually triggering. It was not contributing. So my doing my thing, my taking responsibility, my putting time and dedication, my this, my that, and I have Saturn in Scorpio, so it's dredging up the core issue, and it's kind of like, let's transform it together. And their Saturn was like going in a different direction. And indeed, we both on the fixed axis found it difficult to have changes in life, and I needed to move to a bigger place already, but I found it difficult to make the change. So there was this crisis where we just had to separate. And I was no longer, I was filling up a place in his life that would no longer belong to the place that he should put me in. Okay, we were friends. So that was another reason I had to grow up. But because of the square relations, then we have a crisis of maturation rather than a trine relations. And so again, when you talk about family, when you talk about people that you just spend time with or you grow up into, then in some severe cases you will need a separation or a separation for a while, and that's okay. But in most cases where it's people that you kind of like, you don't choose your family, then again, coming to the astrology and synastry as engineering of relationships, we can alleviate the grudges, shame, blame. He did that, she did that, they did do whatnot. Okay, we can eliminate that and alleviate that and just say, okay, there's this person, and let's say this issue is not a Mars thing. I have another episode coming on Mars, but it's Saturn. This person's Saturn. And they could be like, how would you put it? 12 years younger. So we have a square. We have 12 years between us. We have a square, Saturn square. Or 14 years, 12 to 14 years. Or we have 14 years, yeah. 14 years, it would be the opposition already. So what would be 7 years? What would be? Yeah, 7 years, 8 years. We have the square. Or 14 years between us, we have the opposition. Okay? And let's say this is your sister and your brother and you deeply love them. And they deeply love you. Okay? What can you do? Or one thing that you can do is invite into your life and surround yourself with people whose Saturn sextiles and trines your Saturn. And from them choose who are, the best people for you. So you want to remediate this aspect. So one way to do that, if you think about Saturn is about 3 years in a given sign, 2 to 3 years in a given sign. It takes 28 years to surround the zodiac. So I think, let's say, a person who is 3 years younger than you or 3 years older than you, you're building up upon each other. Okay? So if you're looking at the person who is 3 years younger than you, they might be looking up to you because what you're doing is where they're heading. Or a person who is 3 years older than you, like their Saturn. Okay, this is very, very interesting because Saturn rules time, it rules history, the generations, not also the generation if it's like the nervous system, but the people who are younger than you, their Saturn is building up on your Saturn. Okay? So being in connection with people who are 3 years younger than you can help you to build up on their stuff. And I've seen it. I ran into a person whom I don't know in the real life, and they were born, I think, 3 or 4 years after me. And immediately the thing that came to me astrologically was how me and him should listen to a person that was only a year older than me, because this person is going through a certain transit now that me and him are up next. And you think about the 3 years of the Saturn, it's kind of like what I'm doing with my Saturn, his Saturn is building up upon it. And so first of all, I need to look and I need to give good structure. So this would mean I would care about this person. I would care to do good things. I would care to tend to my Saturn, because this person, they would later face the consequences of my actions because they build up upon me. I guess I feel responsibility towards this person. And a person who is older than me, I build up upon them. So I want to look at what they did, because I build up upon that, and I want to also inspect that and edit that, because I'm re-editing what they did. Okay, that's the 30-degree aspect. Now let's say a person is around 5-6 years older. Now you have the sextile. But you can look at it with charts, because it's not going to be exact. You have to look at charts, and what does the chart say? Because the movement is a bit irregular. But let's say the person is 6 years younger than me. Okay, and this person 6 years younger than me, they would have the Saturn sextile in my Saturn. So they might be looking up to me. But also I might be looking up to them, because they are advancing. Okay? When I tend to my Saturn and they tend to their Saturn, we work in ways that are complementary. Let's say my job is to plant trees, okay? A day job can be to prepare the soil. A day job can be it can be to prepare the soil. It can be to harvest the fruits. It can be to manage the regulation in the government to allow for the preserving of forestation. So they're not looking at me at all. I'm here planting forests, and they're not looking at me at all. And they're like, okay, my job, what I want to do is to conserve the old forests. Okay, and my job is to build new forests. So I'm building forests. Once my forest is grown, I'm like, who is going to safekeep my forest? Oh, the person whose Saturn is sextile in mine, or trine in mine. Now we can bridge each other. Now, as we tend to Saturn, as we put in the time and dedication, our ways meet, and we are on the same team. Who will take care of all these trees when I'm gone? Who will take care that this forest will be preserved? Oh, there's this person 6 years younger than me, and they're just coming to be a governor. I should vote for them. I should vote for them. I should promote them. Okay? And as you're tending to your Saturn, you'll see how that, the path clears. You get all these understandings. And we also look 6 years before me. So who was born 6 years before me? What are they doing with the Saturn? Where's the Saturn? What's it doing? Okay. Oh, they could be building homes from woods. And then I can go back to them and say, well, I heard you're building wood houses. Okay, in the United States, all the houses are made of wood. I heard you're building wood houses. Now tell me, how many trees do I need to plant so that we can both conserve the forests and have enough housing for people? It tells me, I don't know. I need to look to the Saturn 6 years younger than me because they were looking at the population rates and the statistics. Okay, and you can see how we work together as a team. We complete each other across the generations. And so even if you were born into, let's say, a family where your Saturns are not in alignment, okay, then it's not the entirety of the sum of people you encounter regarding Saturn. And you can acquire friends, you can acquire business partners, you can look at your own chart. You know, you can also see how you can come to me with Synastry, and eventually I'd look at your own chart. Tell me, what is the issue with this relationship? I say, Shirley, I have been changing, I have been growing, I have been putting time and dedication. I've also putting time for rest and rejuvenation. I have been planting crops. I have been doing things. And I see that the more I take responsibility in my relationship, instead of the person meeting me halfway, there's something along our paths that it used to be okay. And now in the recent year or recent months, I feel like we are growing apart. And I was wondering, is it something we can do about this? And if it is a Saturn thing, and I see that like me and my bestie, or me and the person in academia that was actually contributing a lot to my path, but came Saturn, we found ourselves in two distinct other ways of the world, distinct other karmas, sozusagen. And I could say, well, listen, they have a Saturn maturation, you have a Saturn return, or you have a Saturn square, and I see that your Saturns in the synastry, they are not in harmony. So what you're having now, it can be the case that you're growing apart, and this is what it is. But anyway, even if you keep this relation, you can look at the composite, we can look at other things. You need to take into account that when they are being responsible, they have to go away from you sometimes, and when you're being responsible, have to go away from them, because you can't be bickering at each other's karma like this. Can't be interfering in each other's trajectory in this way. Okay, and then it's time to think about the structure. What structures need to change to allow, now with Pluto is in Saturn sign, what needs to change to allow? And this is how you have just taken the toll of having somebody responsible for your karma, taken a lot of this burden off of your health, hey, your karma, and brought it back to the chart, back to the astrology, back to what is my point of interference in this. And I will not leave you without an example. So I'm going to, well, I don't have to go to my chart. Even I have a Saturn on 12 degrees retrograde in Scorpio. And that means that Saturn in 12 degrees, let's say Sagittarius, would be sextiling my Saturn. I'm sorry, 12 degrees Capricorn would be, but the problem with that is that the Saturn that would be sextiling my Saturn would be conjuncting my Jupiter, but opposing my Moon. Is just something that we don't want. So I can go to, yeah, and then already have a wider gap. Okay. Another point is Saturn that would be in the middle phase of Virgo, which could actually sextile my Saturn and provide me with a time frame or trajectory that would be also my 7th house. So I have to consider that. Or alternatively, well, Saturn in Cancer would conjunct my Moon, And Saturn would in Pisces would be in my Saturn in my first house. It can cause perhaps aging, but also maturation. So we can look at this Saturn Virgo. And this is how you do it. You go to Astro Tools. And if you ask me, okay, what about Saturn in the same sign? That can work. We'll need to see what is the karma. Okay, what is going on? Because if it's Saturn conjunct Saturn, it just means that you have the same path. But sometimes to complete your work in life, you do need other structures to support you. And this is where you also want the structures to go in alignment with you. The good thing about having Saturn conjunct Saturn, if you're a partnership or a couple or a family, is that whatever will be good for you will also be the structure that are going to be benefic for you will also be benefic for your partner if everything else is okay, is in agreement with that, and then you will have less inner conflict about what structures do we bring into our lives. And structures can be your housing, it can be the land that you're living in, it can be the juristic system, okay, prenuptials and stuff. It would be how to raise the children, depending on what is associated with the Saturn, where it's at. Now, when we want to look at the specifics, so we have celebrity search. Okay, let's say let's say you're isolated, you don't know anybody, you're sitting on an island. You can open astrosig.com, celebrity astro search engine, and you look for the Saturn. Let's take a Saturn. That is around, for me, it would be, let's say, Virgo, around the middle phase of that. For me, it's 10 to 15. And just press OK. You can also play with the houses. You can play with the direct or indirect motion. And let's say Sigourney Weaver. Okay, so Sigourney Weaver's, she was born in 8 October 1949. It's the same birth year of my mom, actually. And she has a moon on her ascendant, and her moon and ascendant is on my Venus. She has a Jupiter in midheaven, just between my Jupiter and kind of like my lot of fortune. And she has her descendant between my Pluto and my Saturn, and Saturn in Virgo. Now, this Saturn is not really in conjunct in the moon. Some minor aspect, but I'm not sure which. I think it is the 72 degrees, which is an okay transit. It's a very good one, actually, because it's like a hidden harmony. And she has a lot in my 8th house. There's Neptune in my 8th house, so that's something to consider. Okay, Neptune in your 8th house is the blending of energy. We could also be loss. But let's say we just look at the Saturn. So this means that in Synastry, our Saturns would be sextiling. Now, what did Sigourney Weaver do? Issues. So I can just look for this woman. And oh my God. Okay, I'll tell you how I know this, like not in person, how I know this woman from the screen. Oh my God. Okay. And why do I say oh my God? Well, it runs in the family. It runs in the family from my mama. At around, I think, 1984, the year that I was born, there was a movie called Working Girl. And in that movie, she played the female boss that tried to plagiarize the aspiring mergers and acquisitions businesswoman that came to work as a secretary. And she was playing this kind role of like, give me your ideas. And then she plagiarized the ideas. And she went on a vacation. She broke her leg skiing. And that secretary found out on the record that her stuff were plagiarized. And so she decided to do something about it. She pretended to be her boss. And she was looking for closing a deal. So she had the idea for the deal to close, and she basically was plagiarized. She was taking it on herself and pretending to be her boss, and she closed that deal. And on the way, she met the very person that boss was dating and wanted to separate from this boss, and they had an affair with him, and they began to close this deal together. And so eventually she was discovered, and she was like, proving, it was in the elevator, she was proving to that person that she came to give the deal to, she was proving that it was her that originated this idea, and said, listen, if I told you I was the secretary, would you talk to me? Okay, so that lady, this Sigourney Weaver, basically played the boss, and that movie was about climbing up the ladder and understanding that your female boss is not necessarily better than your male boss. Okay, you just have to have a human being going there. It's not what do they have between their pants, is what kind of a human being they are when you have a human being. Okay, but the way that she was showing that was basically by being the malefic boss. So this is how I know I seen this woman. Okay, American actress, figure in science fiction, popular culture, received various accolades, British Academy Film Award, was voted number 20 in Channel 4 Countdown, and yeah, rose to fame starring as Ellen Ripley in Ridley Scott's science fiction Alien, 1979, reprised her role in James Cameron's Aliens, 86, then Alien and Resurrection. Is reunited with Cameron on Avatar in 2009, and Avatar, the continuation, 2002, which was the COVID time. Yeah, it's Working Girl. She got another Golden Globe Award for the performance in Working Girl. So, okay, now, of course, you have to look at the details. Okay, this woman has Neptune in my freaking 8th house. I'm not sure that that's what I need right now. But when it comes to the Saturn, you see how that face was kind of building on, or that face were already familiar with me. Then we can pick another person, a screenwriter, Jennifer Love Hewitt. Oh, Aaliyah, sorry. Yes, because Aaliyah, I know. So Aaliyah. And Aaliyah also has this, she has Rahu in Virgo, she has Saturn retrograde in Virgo, which would sextile my Saturn. Yeah, this is almost on a degree. And she has Pluto in the 8th house. Over the Pluto Libra generation, which can actually contribute to rejuvenation of my 8th house. Okay. Brings Uranus to my 9th, Venus to my 10th, Neptune not too far from my midheaven. I already have this aspect. It's a very interesting one. Sun and Mars. She also has Sun, the Mars in Capricorn, which would also sextile. She has both her Mars and her Saturn sextiling my Mars and Saturn. This is a woman that I remember from R&B. Okay, this is a woman whose songs I have been enjoying. When I think about Aaliyah, her voice was not especially strong. It was not like Beyonce's voice that has this operatic thing. She was a very skilled singer, but she had this kind of lower tones, kind of more relaxed tones, and it was easier for me to sing her songs. Okay, I didn't feel like I have to be, all this big range, strong voice. So that's something that I remember with Aaliyah. And she was also kind of like an R&B singer, singing sexual or erotic songs that were not rap songs, because you had like rap songs, but she made like an R&B. It was very erotic. It kind of paved the path for what Beyonce would later do with her music. It's kind of like, it's not the Little Kim rap, but definitely extremely erotic songs and extremely sexual songs that are being perceived as the mainstream. Okay, so, and I have Mars in Scorpio. She has Mars there with the sun. That would mean her sun would trine my Mars. Okay, that is already a chart or a persona. Eventually, I would learn that she also was into Egyptian occultism, and so on and so forth. She has the moon in my kind of Virgo house, Jupiter and Lilith in Leo. Okay, that those could be a bit, because Leo is my 6th house. But this way, let's say you don't know anybody. You don't know anybody. But you like Aaliyah. You listen to Aaliyah. Okay? Then you can listen to her music. Then you can study about her. That you can kind of keep this person together with you, because your paths are complementary. Their karma, okay, what they came to build, is kind of complementary. She also had a Venus square the Saturn, so she was also dealing with learning, growing to growing into self-value. And we had her difficult relationships with R. Kelly, difficult marriage, okay, abusive basically. And Saturn was square Neptune, so there's, you know, this Neptune might be a thing to consider. But all in all, this is how you do it. Okay, so if you came to me for a synastry reading, and I would want to add an energy that harmonizes with your Saturn, and I would ask, okay, do you have people around you that so and so? It could either be, yes, oh, that's that person, I get along with them really well, on that, okay, on that particular topic. But it can also be that you don't know. Like you're with Saturn, you could be isolated. Okay, you two could be isolated from society. And so I say, okay, but do you listen to songs? Do you watch movies? Do you have, you know, exposure to culture? Granted, you're not living in a cult. So you could bring these charts into your life. And when you listen to these people, you basically listen to these charts. And you can learn from these people. You can build up on what these people did. Whereas, like, you know, Aaliyah, like I said, with the voice, okay, the way her singing or expressions, sexuality in songs are not necessarily rap songs, or sexuality that focuses on the pleasure of the woman from the sex. Okay, and also singing in a relaxed way, kind of like you don't have to shout and scream and belt your soul out to make an impact, and to have your voice being heard and accepted. So especially if you have, you know, I have Venus opposing Saturn, so I can have a good technique, but I will not always have this very strong voice when I'm singing, and that can alleviate that. So you see, oh, there's this person that wasn't singing anywhere near as, you know, strong, but they had a good technique, they had a good vibe to them, and they were very skilled. So they were still very much listened to and very much loved and very much honored and very successful with their voice. So this is one example for these Saturn. Another way you could do it is you could look at the composite, and like I said, if you're the midpoints, the point in between your Saturns, okay, the midpoint is where your Saturn in the composite would be. If it is, let's say, trining Venus, then you look at Venus. Maybe through your love languages, you can bridge this. Maybe not. Okay, I don't know. I need to see if it works for you. So this is another thing to look at. Because Saturn is such a slow-moving planet, those are things that you will only run into when you or the other person are having Saturn transits. like the heavyweight Saturn transits. Because now you pay attention to that. And therefore, looking at the synastry, understanding that this exists, and building up and predicting for it. There's nothing wrong in saying, okay, maybe we can try to bridge this, but we also need to plan for what would be the structure. What happens in case that when you take responsibility, you're growing in a way that interrupts with my growth. When I take responsibility, I grow in a way that interrupts with your growth. And this can also be your teaching. Okay, if you come to me as an astrologer and you have, let's say, Saturn in Aquarius, then it can be that I give you advice, just like what happened with my bestie, ex-bestie. My Saturn in Scorpio would dredge up the intergenerational trauma of a timeline, tell you, and because I've radically accepted about me, I'm like, okay, I noticed this thing, and it's this deep scorpionic thingy. And let's say I meet you and you have a Saturn in Sagittarius, meet Sagittarius, you're going to tell me, oh, woman, I never thought about this. You're right. Let's say you have it in Capricorn, you're like, damn, girl, you're deep, you're thorough. I like that. I like the dedication. I like it that you dredge up the truth. You don't fuck me up, or, so whatever. But let's say you're Aquarius, you're like, the fuck, you just touched my deepest trauma? Like that? No, I was not in any way ready for this. And I'm like, okay, like, sorry. And they say, you can't do this with people. I'm like, but the 3 clients before you just loved it. It doesn't matter. Okay? And so when we look at these Saturn thingies, and you come to address me about the Saturn reading, or anyone, how is your Saturn in relation to the Saturn of the astrologer? We talk about standardization. Nobody can teach you standardization. Okay, and also I cannot always dredge up an entire synastry. Okay, if you were on a conversation, you tell me, okay, I want to talk about Saturn. And you say, okay, if I can see where your Saturn is sitting. If I give you advice about Saturn, I could like traumatize you. What can we do? There's other things that I can offer you. But this is way more standardizing and creating structure than saying you have to go through this and that course and do this and that. It was like, I've never heard anybody talking about this in our community of astrologers. I never heard anybody talking about it. It's a signature me thing that I can share with you that you can apply. But this is, this is kind of interesting, because you would think, oh, if let's say Saturn is in Aquarius and it's like my Saturn maturation, so I can say, well, I went through a Saturn maturation, they're going through a Saturn return. I can give them advice on Saturn stuff and help them. It will be alleviated for my Saturn. But instead, because of the square relations, then my taking responsibility actually interrupts their ability to take responsibility. Yeah, when you consider the fact that the person in academia during the Me Too case had a 22-degree Saturn that squares my Mars and is in square relation by sign to my Saturn, you understand that my desire to hold him accountable was basically interrupting with his ability to take responsibility. So what we needed was to get the fuck out of each other and not even try. Basically, not even try. Okay? Because the more I take responsibility, say, I'm not going to go to court, I'm not going to sue him, I'm going to dredge up what's actually working so we can change that, we can change the structure, that actually, well, not undermined, but very much interrupted with his ability to take responsibility. And then I got bickering comments that were interrupting with my path of healing. I'm like, let me talk, I need to heal. It's not against you, I need to heal. Sex chakra or throat chakra. You violated my sixth chakra. I speak it out, receive validation. I leave you the fuck alone. I don't need to sue you. I'm not looking for your money. You're gonna need a lot of money. You're gonna need a lot of time to recover yourself. You intend to take responsibility, okay? And so the more that I try to take responsibility and heal, it's kind of like interrupting with their means to take responsibility, even when they do desire to. Okay, just understanding that. Yeah, or like the example that I gave with my bestie, that what another Saturn would say, thank you. Because I could go to I don't know how many people and nobody would dare to tell me that. And then you go to the wrong person. It's like, how dare you say that? Okay? So it can be a lot of planets, but because Saturn is our karma, our trajectory, what we're building, what do we get in life when we take responsibility over our actions and tend to, sowing good seeds, nurturing them, and yielding. It's very important to support ourselves with as many people that we can that are complementary to that, and let go as much as we can of those that are not complementary to that. And the structures, we talk about Pluto and Saturn, the structures of academia, society, patriarchy, blah, 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 they need to be transformed to allow this. So we won't have to be constricted in this structure, bickering at each other's life. It's no good. Okay? We need to change this, transform the structures so that we allow people to be, to live and let live. So, this is Saturn. And so again, since my Saturn is in Scorpio, then I'm more, let's say, compatible to give advice to people with Saturn in the mid phase of Virgo, the mid phase of Capricorn, as well as the mid phase of Cancer. It could be a bit tricky because my moon is there. Okay, so I could be like reacting to emotionally, so that would probably, the Capricorn Cancer would probably be more problematic. And Pisces. Okay, so for the people who are having, so I'm actually a lot more equipped than I thought to give you a good advice on Saturn return if your Saturn is in Pisces. Because, yeah, I didn't predict that. But this is something that I understand now doing this. So, yes, of course, there is the how does Saturn relate in a synastry. Well, it deserves its own episode. That being said, Saturn, let's see, we talk about Saturn to inner planets. With Saturn, we always prefer the good aspects, because this is the structure. If you think about, I'm going to be in this structure with this person, you want the structure to be comfortable, to be supportive of you. You want the place where there are restrictions to build up your strength in a way that is harmonious, that you don't feel like, you think about fitness, okay? Think about strength training, or think about swimming. It's great, it's good for your bones. So think about swimming. So you like swimming. Wonderful. Another person, they can't stand being in the water. I tell them, a good exercise for your bones is to swim. I mean, surely I can't see the water. I can't stand being in the water. I hate the water. Maybe they have a trauma associated with the water. I don't know. Okay? Don't tell me to go swimming. We will have to figure out, but you know what they tell me? The primal thing, when you act like an animal, you make all these weird movements, and this is body weight training. It's very good for your bones. I like that. It's like, okay, let's go do that. Because if I put everyone to a swimming class, because swimming is good for you, okay? And some of these people have traumas with swimming. Some people can't stand the water. Some of the people are sensitive to the chemicals in the chloride or whatnot in the swimming pool. Then I didn't do anything good. And so Saturn is the structure, is a standard. And so when it comes to Saturn, we want as many comfortable aspects that we can, like I don't know aspects or comfortable aspects, so that in this connection we are in structures that are actually supportive of our relation and supportive of what we do in life and supportive of our health and well-being and so on and so forth. So this is how a Saturn can bring structure to your life, but is actually supportive. And when we come to the composite, and again, Saturn is what we want to have harmonious. This is why when I said, oh, well, the Saturn in the mid phase of Capricorn, it would sextile my Saturn, but it will also oppose my moon. And if we don't have a mediation with the midpoint, or it's like Saturn trining moon in the composite, then we could have too much emotional coldness, because Saturn is cold and moon is emotions. And we can be emotionally critical of each other, and that can literally destroy us. Okay, so unless we have some sort of remediation for that, I'll probably not opt for the Saturns in Capricorn, or would very much restrict the encounters unless we have a lot of remediation for that. We have, the composite is looking good, or they have a Saturn maybe is, it's trining their moon, or and their moon somehow sextiles my moon, and it's kind of like through their emotional intelligence they can provide for me safety, even though they sometimes feel cold and I still feel okay, and I'm not having like menstrual cycle problems because of that. So that is a more holistic way to look at those synastries. So yes, this is Saturn. So Saturn, because it is structuring your life, you want to make sure that you are entering structures that allow you to grow. Okay, and I can tell you, with both the person in academia and my ex-bestie, those were not people that were consciously trying to block my growth. Not at all. Both were trying to tell me, like, okay, you need to go, I don't know, study in the United States, but quickly because you're getting old. Okay, oh yeah, you like to study, like do something with yourself, goals, and so go for another degree. It's like they were very supportive. Okay? But because the Saturns come in, the minute the Saturn came in, whenever each person was taking responsibility, the other person was suffering. And there's something that needed like a separation. This is also when you had a conflict. Let's say you had a nasty breakup. And when you had this nasty breakup, you kind of think, well, there were structures in my life that needed to change. And you change these structures and you say, okay, should I call my ex-friend? Should I make a call to that? Should I, when things are all changed, can we just be friends right now with the changed structure? Sometimes you can. Sometimes that was the meaning of it. Okay, but when these Saturns are bickering at each other, then when you think about the long term, you're like, that would mean, darling, that when another Saturn comes in another 14, 7, or 28 years, you're gonna run into another one. Don't you want to change the structures in your life harmoniously? Because you can. Okay? And again, if this is family or something like this, then you want to surround yourself with enough people that have their Saturn sextiling or trining yours. Okay, we've seen for my chart, either a Virgo that would have its pros and cons, okay, or a Pisces, or Pisces could be causing perhaps problem with my energy because it's my first house. So, unless it's like the exact Saturn in Scorpio, then those are the Saturns that I could have something more long term with without being worried that, hey, that, Saturn phase is going to come and all of the structures that I was reliant on and the positive the things in my life that are going to fall apart. They don't have to. Okay, they don't have to. We have to support them with these structures. And let's say you like me and meet somebody with the Saturn sextile that's kind of like opposing your moon. Look at the composite. One of these Saturns is going to have a Saturn sextile and trining the composite moon. Okay. Then even those hardest of situations, you can still find some alleviation. And then you straighten your moon, of course. Okay. So there are always, there are a lot of points of interference in the structure that you can create in your life to have a supporting system for you. Okay. And this is way more than just to read a synastry. It is way more than just to read a composite. And this is also why when I give consultations, I tend to give them to a person, because now I'm focusing on you. I'm giving you a reading. Yes, I'm going to look at the synastry. Yes, I'm going to look at the composite. I want to look at that relationship. But I'm going to look at your natal chart, and I can give you advices based on your natal chart of where you can remediate this and that. Or when the other person can remediate this and that. And this is, again, how synastry is relational engineering. If the structure allows for life to flow, it will be beautiful. It doesn't mean that one person is like this, one person is like that person is like this, that person is like that. Okay, we all rub each other differently, and even when you have a synastry problematic, you say, I want to help it, and you bring in other people. You bring in other people that are remediative to that. So, yeah. So this is the Saturn wisdom for Saturn day. Gonna go back to the chart of the day, the current planets for the day, and this is Sun, with Sun in the 9th house. It's almost ripe for publishing. Yes, ripe for publishing, I believe. So I'm gonna publish it. And you can share. You can subscribe to my channel. Tali Share on Twitter, Strudel, TALISHEER, no blue check. You can DM me if you want a reading. And see you in my next episode. Bye-bye.